Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Potato Leek Soup. That's right, we're doing the only soup that successfully leads a double life. Although there could be others we haven't found out about. But as far as we know, this is the only one. Since if you serve it hot, it's potato leek soup. But if you serve it chilled, it also goes by the name of Vichyssoise, which is quite delicious. It would probably be easier to rhyme with. But since it's kind of chilly and damp out, we're going to be going with the hot version. And to get started with this delicious soup, the first thing we're going to have to do is take a leek. Actually, like 4 leeks. And we're going to need to trim them up. And while most recipes say to just use the white and very light green parts, I do like to include about an inch or two of that dark green. So I'm going to cut mine right there. And then we can go ahead and cut off that root end and split it lengthwise. And usually we wash our veggies before we cut them. But because leeks are famous for having dirt and sand hiding between all those layers, what we need to do is cut this first and then wash it. So we'll simply split that lengthwise and cut it across as shown. Oh, and I should mention when you buy the leeks, we're going to need 1.5 pounds after trimming. Okay, which is probably going to be like 4 or 5 leeks depending on the size. So I just wanted to mention in case you bought 1.5 pounds of leeks, after trimming that wouldn't be enough. And then once all our leeks are sliced, we'll transfer that into a large bowl and fill that up with nice cold fresh water. And then we'll get in there with our hand and swish it around good. And what's happening as you do this, any silt or sand or dirt is falling to the bottom of the bowl. And if we lift those leeks out of the water post-agitation, they should be pretty clean. And by the way, depending on how dirty they are to start with, we could do that 3 or 4 times if necessary. So I did that twice, but that's going to be up to you. I mean, you are the boss of making sure your leek is on fleek. But anyway, once our leeks are trimmed, washed, and drained, we are ready to move to the stove, where we're going to begin this recipe using the classic French soup method, which is exactly like all the other soup methods except we use twice as much butter. So we'll go ahead and melt a dangerously large amount of butter in our soup pot set over medium-high heat. And once that melts, or at least partially melts, we can go ahead and transfer in our leeks. And then we'll also want to toss in a spoon of salt. And what we're going to do is cook these leeks stirring on medium-high until they just sort of start to break down and soften up. All right, which is going to take, 3 or 4 minutes. And then what we'll do when they start to slump and sort of kind of look like this is we'll reduce our heat down to medium and cook these for at least 30 minutes or until very, very, very soft. And please do not rush this step. It is the key to the entire recipe. Okay, so we're going to let those cook in that butter on medium heat, stirring occasionally, for like I said, at least 30 minutes. Although it could take more. No guarantees. And one thing we can do to keep ourselves entertained while we're waiting is to go ahead and prep our potatoes. And my favorite variety of potato for soup would be the Yukon Gold. I like the taste and texture, but I also think they give this soup an even more beautiful color. And all we need to do to prep these would be to peel them and cut them in smaller pieces. So I cut mine into 8s, and then we'll just keep those in some water so they don't turn brown while we're waiting for our leeks to finish. Speaking of which, let's go take a look. And you're probably thinking, those look nice and soft. I would stop right here. Well, they were close, but not quite as soft as I wanted. So I gave those about another 10 minutes until they look like this. So you really do want to go this far. It is critical to the recipe. They should be very, very soft and almost paste-like. And at this point, we can go ahead and drain our potatoes and add those to the pot, along with some more salt, as well as our cooking liquid, which in my case is going to be chicken broth. Although a lot of recipes call for vegetable stock, which I've never made, since I've never been able to find vegetable bones. So I'm going to go with the chicken broth. And then what we need to do at this point is adjust our heat to maintain a gentle but steady simmer. And we'll simply cook these potatoes until they're very, very soft. And exactly how long that's going to take, I'm not even going to guess at, because I'm assuming we didn't cut our potatoes exactly the same size. So we're just going to let those simmer until they're perfectly tender. And this is me about a half hour later checking mine. Except I'm using a wooden spoon, which is definitely not the right tool for this job. So I grabbed a fork to verify what I suspected, and I confirmed that they were very soft, which means we can move on to the blending step. And I'm going to do mine right in the pot with this immersion blender. But if you don't have one, you can just do this in batches with a regular blender. But be careful, don't burn yourself. Now that is some quality advice. But anyway, I'm going to use my stick blender. And even though we're going to add some more liquid to this, I always think it's easier to blend something like this smooth if we leave it thick. So it might take a minute or two. But once those larger chunks break down, you should only be a minute or two away from a very, very smooth puree. So that is looking just about perfect right there. And then what we'll do once that's been accomplished is go ahead and finish this off with some heavy cream. Ooh, check it out, heart-shaped drips. Anyway, we're going to add some heavy cream, as well as a nice big spoon of creme fraiche. Oh, and by the way, don't worry if you can't find creme fraiche. I'll provide a link on the blog post to a video that we showed you how to make your own. But anyway, we're going to stir that in. And our soup is pretty much done except for two very important things. We of course need to make sure this heats back up, since we just added some cold cream and creme fraiche. Plus, of course, we're going to have to taste for seasoning. And I determined mine needed, as it so often does, a little more salt. And then I just couldn't help myself. I also added a little bit of cayenne. Although I will admit white pepper would be more traditional. So I'm going to go ahead and stir that in. And like I said, wait for this to come back up to serving temp. We don't really need it to come back to a rolling boil, but we do want to serve this soup piping hot. And once we are happy with the temperature and the taste, we'll go ahead and ladle that up into some nice preheated bowls. Only crazy people serve soup in cold bowls. And then I finished up with a little extra swirl of creme fraiche, which was exactly one drip away from perfection. And then we'll finish up with a few chives. And that's it, our potato leek soup is done. And not only is it gorgeous and warm and comforting, it is also one of the most delicious soups of all time. And we have those slow-cooked leeks to thank for that. And I forget what it is that makes them so delicious and savory. Actually, it might be the glutamates. Is it the glutamates? It could be the glutamates. But anyway, just an extraordinarily satisfying and savory soup, which would be very easy to screw up by trying to add a lot of extra stuff in here. So while I usually encourage you to add whatever you like, maybe this one time just follow the recipe as is. Although, having said that, I doubt a handful of crispy bacon would ruin this. But anyway, the point is this is fantastic as is. And sure, it does take a little bit of time. But you know what they say. There are great soups, and there are fast soups. But there are no great fast soups. And this, my friends, is truly a great soup. So I really do hope you give this a try soon. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.